Hello friends, very good evening, greetings of this beautiful evening to all of you. Dear friends, I hope you all must be pretty charged with patriotic pride feelings because yesterday was the Republic Day of our motherland. And the way in which the Republic Day parade celebrations were conducted yesterday morning, the vision of that parade filled us with great enthusiasm and unexplainable feelings of nationalism because it very beautifully explained the overall diversity of various cultures, traditions, and also the recent policies, the modifications, the women-centric moves which are actually taking place in our country is actually commendable. It is actually commendable. And the way the overall developmental scenario was demonstrated in yesterday's session, that truly explains that how rich we are in terms of economic diversity and the overall cultural prospects, very beautifully explaining why Indian economy is being highlighted across the globe amidst the challenging global scenario. So this is a very, very visionary moment for all of us, and this has been made possible because of our very extraordinary and visionary leaders. So on this note, dear guys, I feel that I should begin my today's session with certain Hindi proverbs which would actually help you to channelize your overall thoughts, your overall energy towards pondering on the fact that how our country is progressing and moving towards the growth trajectory holistically. And Hindi is our national language. So this is the great feeling of immense pride if I begin my today's session in certain Hindi proverbs, through certain Hindi proverbs. So here it goes. सीधे सीधे सपाट रास्तों पे मोड़ कभी कभी बदलाव की धुरी बन जाते हैं. I repeat, सीधे सीधे सपाट रास्तों पे मोड़ कभी कभी बदलाव की धुरी बन जाते हैं. It is so deep, very beautifully explaining that the only thing which is constant and eternal in nature is change. And change is the universal law of nature. Secondly, देश और व्यक्ति की यात्रा. देश और व्यक्ति की यात्रा में सही मार्ग का चयन भविष्य तय कर देता है. So that means there is immense glory in the present moment, and all of us individually should possess that capability, that potential to actually glorify our present as well as our future by taking productive decisions and optimizing the available resources in the best possible manner in the present moment. Next, हमें गर्व है कि हमने वक्त की अंगुली को थामा है. हमें गर्व है कि हमने वक्त की अंगुली को थामा है. अब विकास पथ ही गंतव्य पथ है. अब विकास पथ ही गंतव्य पथ है. So, dear guys, it's actually a moment of immense celebration, that if we are filled with great energy, with great zeal to excel, that will truly explain our victory in the future. amidst being surrounded with the great challenges across the globe, which are actually disheartening in nature. But still, we need to keep our energies high, because the moment we have in our hand is the present moment. And I have also read somewhere that the best present you can give to yourself as a gift is the best utilization of the present moment. So, on this note, I would like to convey my heartiest wishes for this Republic Day. गणतंत्र दिवस की आप सबको हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. Also, I would like to iterate certain statements being said by our former president, respected Sir APJ Abdul Kalam. Actually, it's a small insight from his very inspiring speeches, one of the most inspiring speeches in the European Parliament. And everyone there applauded for his great speech. So, the concluding remarks of his speech were as follows. Where there is the righteousness in the heart, where there is the righteousness in the heart, then there is beauty in the character. That is, the beauty in character is directly proportional to the righteousness in one's heart. Then, where there is beauty in the character, then there is harmony in the home. And when there is harmony in the home, then there is order in the nation. And when there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. I repeat it. It's truly so inspirational. Where there is rightness in the heart, there is beauty in the character. And where there is beauty in the character, there is harmony in the home. And where there is harmony in the home, there is order in the nation. And where there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. This is truly so beautiful, because as of now, especially in the current times, what we want is the peace in the world. And that can be attained only when even one realizes the importance of peace in the world. And for that, the only requirement is to assure that one's nation is actually established on the basis of order and discipline. And that's what our leaders are doing, to establish order, to maintain order and discipline at the best possible level. Because the journey to overall victory holistically begins from at least one component of the society. That is, even if one component of the society realizes the eternal worth of peace in the world, and for that the best efforts are being made to maintain order, peace and discipline, then obviously the peace in the world, the journey towards attaining peace in the world has actually begun, and hence our path to victory has actually got easier. So this is really beautiful that our country, India, is actually taking the initiative and is putting in all the best efforts with the effective implementation of the moral standards to embark this journey with full enthusiasm and positive spirits. And also, my dear friends, our former President Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam sir was actually applauded with all the people sitting in the Parliament of Europe when he made this inspiring speech. And he was also acknowledged that his speech is really very extraordinary, which has been made by the statesman, scientist, and a poet, and who is actually representing the nation India. So we should actually carry the great pride of our true origin, of the roots of our existence. That is, we should maintain the dignity of our motherland, India, the nation among nations, the pride among the mankind. Moreover, I would also like to state that in recent times, despite the pandemic in several years, and also as we know that the global environment is actually turning more and more intense on a gradual basis, still the research in all the sectors with launch of numerous schemes by the respected government of India is actually highlighting ease of living, ease of doing business, and digitalization towards the holistic growth of the country. So this is truly magnificent, truly magnificent. Now, my dear guys, I would like to begin my lecture on today's topic, that is to explore the core intricacies of the banking sector, paying major emphasis on the recent developments being initiated by the respected authorities. Moreover, how are the external environmental factors helping the banking authorities to actually restructure, remodify, and redesign the overall operations of the banking sector in the country, hence trying to maintain an optimum balance between the economic goals and the goals of the banking sector, as the banking sector is really the backbone of the success for any economy, and hence to ensure that our overall momentum of our present efforts to actually meet the challenges being posed by the global environment, to assure the momentum of this particular aspect, we need to be very, very proactive and practical, and hence should implement the changes in a timely manner for the overall effectiveness and efficiency. Moreover, my dear friends, we are also going to discuss the core matters pertaining to the Air India Limited and how its operations are actually in the plan of diversification, and what are the challenges it is expected to face in its sector. And we are also going to discuss what are the bright areas in our economy, in our automobile sector, because of which an international brand, Lamborghini, is actually getting motivated to expand its scale in India. So this really tells us that how significant SWOT analysis and PESTLE analysis are for the continuous monitoring of the internal environment and external environment, and hence it very beautifully tells us that what are the effective plans of action one needs to incorporate, what are the necessary changes, what are the necessary modifications, or what are the necessary revisions one need to incorporate in the existing operations or in the existing style of operating a particular system. Now, my dear guys, let's begin with today's discussion. And firstly, we are going to discuss, we are going to discover and explore that how can the upcoming budget help the banking sector of India keep up with the overall growth ambitions of the country. That is, the overall actions need to be in sync with each other. So, the clock is ticking on India's race to actually become a $5 trillion economy by 2024-25. However, according to the prediction made by the International Monetary Fund in the month of May, when it said India's $5 trillion economy plan is likely to be set back by about 2 years to 2026-27. Everyone from industry experts to the government officials say a major force that can drive this pursuit forward is an upgrade in India's banking system. While India has made significant progress on many fronts, including Open Credit Enablement Network, that's OCEN, Open Network for Digital Commerce, that is ONDC, not to mention the Unique Identification Authority of India, that is UIDAI, and the Goods and Services Tax, that is GST, which have made India's financial services ecosystem one of the most advanced in the world. Consolidation in the banking sector is actually very critical to manage the costs and gain the scale. Now, to be fair, the banking sector's outlook of India has actually improved, with asset quality and growth metrics possibly looking at their best over the last decade. The Reserve Bank of India, in its Financial Stability Report for June, showed India's gross net performing assets ratio falling to a 6-year low of 5.9% in March, highlighting the banking system's rising ability to support economic growth. And my dear friends, this is actually the real matter on which we need to focus, how to attain balance between the development of the banking sector and the development of an economy as a whole. That is, how to maintain the synchronization between these two aspects is where the true development of an economy lies in holistic terms. Mr. Aniket Dani, Director of Research, Crisis Market Intelligence Analytics, says the Indian banking sector has actually emerged stronger from the multiple challenges it faced. With most of the legacy stress in the corporate loan book recognized, the banks have stronger, cleaner balance sheets that are allowing them to shift the focus back on credit growth. This is really the main highlight, hence I would like to repeat it. The Indian banking sector has actually emerged stronger from the multiple challenges it faced. With most of the legacy stress in the corporate loan book recognized, the banks have stronger, cleaner balance sheets that are basically allowing them to shift the overall focus back on credit growth. The government's extensive recapitalization exercise of the public banks over the years has also helped these lenders become more self-sufficient. As the public banks still dominate the Indian banking landscape, the good health, the overall holistic health of these banks is actually of utmost importance for the credit and GDP growth. So, the efforts undertaken by the government are actually bearing results, with the banking sector returning to a decadal high credit growth and India remaining as one of the large economies which are expected to grow in the uncertain and recessionary global growth outlook. The efforts undertaken by the government are actually bearing the results, with the banking sector returning to a decadal high credit growth and India remaining as one of the large economies which are expected to grow in the uncertain and recessionary global growth outlook, says Mr. Strtgc, Vice President and Sector Head, Financial Sector Ratings, ICRA. Now, what are various problem areas in this really interesting journey? There was a weak point that was overlooked. The Indian consumers have always indulged Indian banks with their wealth because of the safety and the higher savings rates these institutions offered. Mr. Dvrsfcn, Head of Financial Services at EY India, says the banks that had access to the large-scale funds at low cost lent liberally and at the rates that failed to represent the underlying risk. The risk assessment abilities were never built as the cheaper cost of funds offered a good buffer. However, a macro change where credit growth became faster than the deposit growth has actually now raised some questions about the overall stability of the banking system. I repeat, a macro change where the credit growth became faster than the deposit growth has now actually raised some questions about the stability of the banking system. So, just out of a credit crisis, the banks have become wary of lending, shrinking the pool of available credit and also risking an impact on India's GDP growth. Also, the rising interest rates not only in India but also globally have actually thrown up a new set of challenges. For one, the deposits are being replaced by investments in equity and debt markets in search of better yields. Also, in a reversal of trends with the domestic rates at a lower level than the global ones, the top-rated companies in India are actually looking for refinancing locally rather than actually borrowing overseas. While AA-rated companies soak up domestic liquidity, those rated lower than AA are actually finding it difficult to find funding. Lastly, the banks in India need to play catch up with the fintechs. So, the banks need to actually better their overall ability of understanding and catering to the customers who do not meet the conventional banking client acceptance benchmarks. The banks need to build strong collection capabilities to be able to replace the traditional NBFC markets, Mr. Dvrsfcn adds. Now let's analyze a case for the big banks. Past Chief Economic Advisor Mr. KV Subramanian, Finance Minister Dr. Nirmala Sitharaman, and the industry experts have all highlighted the need for India to have more banks that can actually compete on a global scale. Despite being the fifth biggest economy in the world, India has only one bank, that is the State Bank of India, on S&P's top 100 global bank list. SBI is actually 53rd on the list. However, China has 18 banks on the list and the United States of America has 12, while much smaller countries like Finland, Denmark, Belgium, Austria and Norway each have one bank. So, for India to achieve its $5 trillion economy plan, it still has far too many sub-scaled banks which are not able to provide the requisite quantum of capital which is actually required for the large-scale expansions, says Mr. Dvrsfcn of EY. Strtgc agrees, adding that the government already has some solutions in the pipeline. The overall amalgamation of the public sector banks, that is the PSBs, and the proposed divestment of the government ownership in some of these large banks would consolidate the position of Indian banks and put them in the league of large global banks, he adds. This is the main highlight and a very important conclusion, hence I would like to repeat it. The amalgamation of the public sector banks and the proposed divestment of government ownership in some of these large banks would actually consolidate the position of Indian banks and therefore put them in the league of the large global banks, he adds. So, after the thorough SWOT analysis and PESTLE analysis with regard to the banking sector and in view of further enhancing its overall prospects in the Indian economy, in holistic terms, we should actually try to focus our efforts towards the current need of the hour that has been proposed by the respected pioneers of the industry. So let's analyze what lies ahead. What's the road ahead now? Even though the banking system is actually steadily improving in the Indian economy, some key points are actually very essential for making this performance sustainable. The banks will need to improve the risk appetite. Resolution of stressed assets need to happen at a faster pace. And lastly, technology adoption should happen faster, says Mr. Choksi. So, the Indian private sector banks have made remarkable inroads into the domestic market. The private and some public sector banks, mainly SBI, have taken a significant digital leap and actually managed to pocket a bigger market share in the consumer segment. But for India to be on a par with global banks, a few things need to happen, explains Mr. Dvrsfcn. Firstly, India needs to work towards building and enabling a corporate debt market where the corporate loans are traded. So even though the RBI has the regulations in place, setting up the necessary infrastructure and tax considerations need to be addressed. Secondly, the structure of the National Asset Reconstruction Company, that is NARC, needs a relook to enable the disposal of bad loans centrally with an enabling fund to revive the companies, revitalize the select assets, and hence provide employment in an effective manner. And thirdly, the RBI and the Securities and Exchange Board of India, that is SEBI, need to work together in order to make credit markets seamless and formulate the regulations to enable neo-banking, where India already has the necessary infrastructure. So, dear guys, this particular write-up very beautifully explains the current plans of action which need to be implemented by the concerned authorities in a timely manner in order to actually attain successful accomplishment of the goals set by the banking sector, and also to establish an optimum balance between the goals of the banking sector and the economic goals. And that's where the true development of a society lies. So, a vibrant corporate debt market, improved NARC, and the policies that ensure seamless credit mechanisms will actually help India build the banks that can compete on a global scale, a basic necessity to keep the country's growth ambitions alive. Now, my dear friends, let's try to understand what all effective measures the Supreme Court is directing to the Reserve Bank of India with respect to reining in the non-performing assets. The Supreme Court on Wednesday asked the Reserve Bank of India to actually inform it about the steps the banking regulator could take to implement a high-level committee's recommendations to tackle the bad loans. A bench led by Justice Strtgc gave 4 weeks for the RBI to file its reply. The direction came after the central bank RBI said it had accepted the recommendations of the 5-member committee constituted by the government to steady the banking reforms. So, among its suggestions on recovering the non-performing assets, the committee in 2017 said banks must publish on their websites the list of defaulters whose names are already in the public domain or where the recovery proceedings are initiated under the SWOT Act. It said also the promoters should be personally made liable for any siphoning off of the funds. The instructions are being issued mandating the banks to examine and take a view on classifying an account as a case of willful default are not within 60 days of it becoming an NPA, that is the non-performing asset, where the exposure is actually more than 50 crore rupees, the RBI said in an affidavit. So the central bank said it was expanding the definition of willful defaulters to include the borrowers who had committed to infusing equity but eventually failed to do so. It is also exploring the overall feasibility of the banks using the data from the Central Repository of Information on Large Credits to actually gather information on the group entities of the borrowers. The Reserve Bank of India claimed that its efforts had actually resulted in a material decline in the non-performing assets. So, during the hearing, Justice Kaul commented, "We have to balance the issue of public money and seeing that the ending procedure is actually not too cumbersome. We have seen many cases where nothing happens. Those who had invested were left high and dry." The judge said the basic priority should be the cases where the amount is actually quite huge. The Solicitor General, Mr. Tushar Mehta, appearing for the government, said the bank customer relationships were actually fiduciary and that separate regimes were in place to actually tackle the issue through the statutes like the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code and the Stwc Act. Now, my dear guys, after this great conceptual framework which we have just discussed with regard to the overall analysis of the banking sector and the set of recommendations given by the Supreme Court to the Reserve Bank of India in order to rein in NPAs, wherein the Supreme Court asked the RBI to inform it about the steps the banking regulator could take to actually implement a high-level committee's recommendations to tackle the bad loans. I would actually like to move forward wherein we would like to discuss and actually analyze the insights presented by the respected RBI Governor Dr. Shaktikanta sir, where he explains that worst of inflation, growth and currency crisis is actually behind us. The Reserve Bank of India Governor Dr. Shaktikanta Das on Friday basically said the latest data prints on growth, inflation and currency volatilities indicate that the worst for the financial markets and the entire world economy is actually behind us, and the high interest rates for a longer period basically look a distinct possibility going forward. So, though the global economy is actually projected to contract significantly in 2023, the worst, both in terms of growth and inflation, seems to be behind us. That is, these are the major challenges being posed in the current year. Though they had been persisting from quite a number of months, but now these challenges are actually expected to gradually intensify in the coming times, because if we analyze the overall scenario existing at a global level, it's actually little worrisome. But I can assure you that if our current regime, the current protocol of operating the system is actually very dynamic, as is in place, where our leaders are so proactive and dynamic and very, very extraordinary in their overall approaches to conduct the operations for an economy with a visionary mindset, our victory is really certain. So lately, with some ebbing of the COVID-related restrictions and cooling inflation in various countries, though still elevated, the central banks have actually started what appears to be a pivot towards lower rate hikes or pauses. Dr. Das told the annual meeting of the Fixed Income Money Market and Derivatives Association of India, that is FIMTA, and the Primary Dealers Association of India, that is PDAI, held in Dubai on Friday. I repeat, though the global economy is actually projected to contract significantly in 2023, the worst, both in terms of growth and inflation, seems to be behind us. Lately, with some ebbing of the COVID-related restrictions and cooling of inflation in various countries, though still elevated, the central banks have actually started what appears to be a pivot towards lower rate hikes or pauses. Dr. Das told the annual meeting of the Fixed Income Money Market and Derivatives Association of India and the Primary Dealers Association of India, held in Dubai on Friday. But Dr. Das put a caveat, saying at the same time, the central bankers continue to empathetically reiterate their resolve to bring inflation down closer to their respective targets. As for India, the well-accepted band is actually 4%. That is, the level of inflation should be below 4%. So, at the same time, the high policy rates for a longer duration appear to be a distinct possibility going forward. So, on the growth front, the projections are now veering around to a softer recession as against a severe and more widespread recession projected a few months back. On the domestic front, he said, in this hostile and uncertain international environment, our economy remains resilient, drawing strength from its macroeconomic fundamentals. Our financial system remains robust and stable. The banks and corporates are healthier than before the crisis. The bank credit is growing in double digits. We are widely seen as a bright spot in an otherwise gloomy world. Our inflation remains elevated, but there has been a welcome softening on November and December. Core inflation, however, remains sticky and elevated, the governor said. So these are the parameters on which we should actually be very proud of. Our overall governance protocol has actually been a backbone and is a backbone for our continuous success in the tough times especially. Hence, I would like to repeat these major strategies on which our government and the respected banking authorities are focusing on, which is actually bearing the fruits for the entire economy. Our financial system remains robust and stable. The banks and corporates are healthier than before the crisis. The bank credit is growing in double digits. We are widely seen as a bright spot in the otherwise gloomy world. Our inflation remains elevated, but there has been a welcome softening on November and December. Core inflation, however, remains sticky and elevated, the governor said. On the domestic financial markets, Dr. Das said, since the 1990s, we have actually come a long way in developing the financial markets. The journey of our financial markets through the last decade has actually been a story of steady progress with stability. Going forward, greater challenges will actually emerge as the footprints of our banks increase in offshore markets. The range of products expand, non-resident participation in the domestic markets grows, and as the capital account convertibility increases, the market participants will have to prepare themselves to manage the changes and the risks associated with the globally integrated markets. The achievement of the desired outcomes is actually contingent on the financial institutions and market participants taking forward the reform agenda so that we have more vibrant and resilient financial markets, Dr. Das said. On the external front, he said, deglobalization and protectionism are actually gaining ground as witnessed around during the recent global supply chain shocks. It is thus necessary to build and strengthen the bilateral trade relationships in order to deal with such challenges. Accordingly, the government recently signed the bilateral trade agreements with the United Arab Emirates and Australia, and more such pacts are in offing. Reeling out the data as a result of the consistent reforms, he said, the average current account deficit to the GDP ratio stands at 3.3 in the first half of the financial year 2023. Though slowing global demand is actually weighing on the merchandise exports, our services exports and remittances remain strong. The net balance under the services and remittances actually remains in a large surplus, partly offsetting the trade deficit. Consequently, the the current account deficit is eminently manageable and within the parameters of viability. The nominal gross domestic product jumped fourfold from 64 lakh crore rupees in the financial year 2010 to 273 lakh crore rupees in the financial year 2023. The external trade also increased over fourfold from 29 lakh crore rupees to 137 lakh crore rupees during this period. This is really a tremendous victory. The ratio of trade to GDP has risen to 45 in 2021 from 25 in 2000, and the foreign direct investment, that is FDI, has risen sharply by 2.5 times since 2010. The overall flow of resources to the commercial sector almost doubled from 12 lakh crore rupees in the financial year 2012 to 22 lakh crore rupees in the financial year 2022. So while the banks continue to be a dominant source of financing, the market borrowings of the commercial sector rose from 74,000 crore rupees in the financial year 2012 to 3,16,000 crore rupees in the financial year 2022. On the financing side, the net FDI flows remain strong and the foreign portfolio flows have resumed since last July with intermittent outflows from time to time. The size of the forex reserves is actually comfortable and has gone up from 524 billion US dollars on October 21, 2022 to 572 billion US dollars on January 13, 2023 as per the latest statistical report. Further, the external debt ratios are low by the international standards. This is another great news. This has actually enabled the Reserve Bank of India to execute the measures to control the capital flows and take the steps to further internationalize the rupee, even during the episodes of significant capital outflows, and this would lead to effective internalization of the domestic currency as well. Today, when we look ahead, we still see the challenges, but we can prepare for them with great optimism and confidence, even as the global economy is still marred by the shocks and uncertainty and financial markets remain volatile and the geopolitical situation continues to be tense, Dr. Das said. So, my dear friends, after going through this well strategized framework as laid down by Dr. Shaktikanta Das, wherein he very beautifully explains his future course of action as per the current requirements of the time, wherein he emphasized that the net balance under the services and remittances basically remains in a large surplus, partly offsetting the trade deficit. Dr. Das said at a conference in Dubai, according to a copy of the speech released by the central bank. This is really very broad-minded and visionary approach towards the current approach towards the current situation existing in the overall global scenario. And if we talk specifically about the banking sector, it holds a huge responsibility to maintain an effective balance between inflation and other core economic parameters, playing a vital role towards securing the holistic economic growth of a nation. Now, my dear friends, Let's discuss the aspects of Tata's Air India, wherein it is actually to seal half of jumbo plane order. Air India today sealed half of an order worth billions of dollars for some 495 jets with Boeing and engine suppliers General Electric and CFM International. The two industry sources said as its new owner seeks to revive the airline and compete with much larger rivals. After months of closely guarded, tough negotiations, Air India is actually set to place an order for 190 Boeing 737 MAX narrow-body planes as well as some 20 Boeing 787s and 10 Boeing 777X on a day marking 1 year since Tata Group took the control of the former state-run carrier, the sources told Reuters. The second half of the order, which industry sources have told Reuters, includes around 235 Airbus single-aisle jets and about 40 Airbus A350 wide-body aircraft is actually expected to be formally wrapped up over the coming days. Senior Boeing, GE and CFM officials are expected in India to mark the deal on Friday. So despite the earlier expectations of a single coordinated announcement, it remains unclear when either deal may be publicly disclosed, especially with the Aero India Air Show looming in February when the deals like this are usually revealed. The manufacturers Boeing and Airbus as well as CFM's joint venture partners GE and Dvrsfcn declined comment. Air India also did not respond to a request for the comment on this particular matter. The Reuters reported last month Air India was closing in on a deal for about 500 jets. The order, once finalized, aims to put Air India in the league of the large global airlines and make it an influential customer for the plane makers and suppliers at a time when its home market is actually seeing a strong post-COVID travel surge. The domestic passenger air travel in India grew 47% in the year 2022 from a year ago, the government data showed. The analysts cautioned the airline faces intense competition given the connectivity carved out by the local and international rivals. India, which is actually set to overtake China as the world's most populous country, has a large underserved air travel market dominated by the budget carrier Indigo. The bulk of India's outbound passenger traffic, however, is actually carried by the Middle Eastern airlines like Emirates and Qatar Airways. So, what is actually driving resurgent Air India? Under its new owners, Air India is actually looking to restore its reputation at home and overseas as a storied carrier with impeccable service and world-class planes. It has put back in service nearly 20 aircraft that had been grounded for years due to the lack of parts and money. The airline has also said it will spend over $400 million to actually refurbish the entire legacy wide-body fleet of 27 Boeing 787-8s and 13 777 aircraft. The basic aim is to actually corner 30% of the domestic air travel market over the next 5 years, thus narrowing the gap with market leader Indigo. It also wants to increase by multiples its current share of international travel, the airline's new chief executive Campbell Wilson previously said. Tata's 4 airlines, including the 2 budget carriers, Air India and Vistara, its joint venture with Singapore Airlines, have a combined market share of around 24%. The analysts have said Air India actually has the ability to claw back some passengers from the rival Gulf carriers, but not before it matches their quality of fleet and service. Nor will the domestic battle with Indigo happen without the tough competition from a carrier that actually continues to expand at a dramatic rate. So, after this great, insightful, and in-depth analytical discussion realizing the prospects of Tata's Air India, wherein we have learned that after the months of closely guarded, tough negotiations, Air India is actually set to place an order for 190 Boeing 737 MAX narrow-body planes as well as some 20 Boeing 787s and 10 Boeing 777X on a day marking 1 year since Tata Group took control of the former state-run carrier. We are further going to analyze what all strengths and the core aspects the Indian automobile market possesses, which is actually acting as a very, very strong factor for Lamborghini, the international automobile brand, to keep on diversifying and investing in India. What are the key factors which are playing a major role for this international brand to actually expand its overall operations with continuous diversification despite the global challenges? Let's analyze. Actually, India was one of the fastest growing markets for the super luxury car maker Lamborghini last year and still continues to exhibit strong demand momentum despite the recessionary risks being seen globally, said a top official in the company. And Mr. Francisco Scardoni, Region Director, Automobili Lamborghini Asia Pacific, said, "Our sales in the Indian market grew by 33% last year. It is actually one of the top performing regional markets that recorded the most in terms of order collection on our latest Lamborghini models. We have a strong order book on back of which we can actually say safely we still grow again this year. We are sold out for 2023. Lamborghini's order book globally stands at over 18 months. Lamborghini, which sells the Urus, then Aventador and Huracan, priced between 3 to 9 crore rupees, sold 92 vehicles in the country in the year 2022. And the company expects to cross the 3-digit mark for the first time in the ongoing calendar year, that is 2023. The potential for the sales of the super luxury cars in the country, though, is in the thousands given the rising numbers of ultra-high net worth individuals. India has a big potential to become a big player in the Lamborghini world. Given the way the economy is growing, the population of ultra-high net worth individuals here, India will be one of our top markets. But the only challenge is infrastructure, which is not actually ready uniformly across the country as per the company's requirements, Mr. Scardoni informed. So, my dear friends, after this great strategic discussion over the overall plans of this international brand Lamborghini, wherein it basically visualizes India as one of the fastest growing markets for its super luxury car maker brand, and is actually expecting the same momentum, the strong demand momentum, to continue in the current year as well, despite the recessionary risks being seen globally. It's really a very, very great moment of pride to see how our economy is flourishing and is realizing the worth of the time, and hence putting in best efforts to bring in the changes, the modifications on continuous basis to keep the momentum and the overall acceleration of the entire efforts in sync with the needs of the time. So, in order to cope up with the challenges being posed by the global scenario, which are actually quite hostile and uncertain in their very own nature, we need to be very, very proactive, and our leaders are possessing this particular trait. Hence, we are very confident that the captain of our ship will help us to sail these high tides and stormy weather with great valor and great strength, hence helping us to turn victorious as always. Thank you so much, dear guys, for your patient and cooperative listening, and I really hope you must have gathered great insights, and this session would have surely helped you to enhance your overall knowledge base holistically. And it was the great pleasure for me as well to conduct this great session, to conduct this great far-sighted session, as my basic aim is to actually re-invoke the great sense of patriotism, the great sense of belongingness, and the great sense of our conviction towards the approaches being adopted by our leaders to manage the current times. So, on this note, I would like to conclude today's session, and I really hope you all take excellent care of yourselves until we meet next. Thank you so much. Namaskar. Jai Hind.